The Ainu people have puzzled scientists for decades. They don't look like the Japanese. Their culture, traditions, and even their DNA tell a story that doesn't quite fit into any known historical timeline. But why? How can an indigenous group in Japan have genetic connections that stretch across Siberia, Central Asia, and even North America? For centuries, the Ainu lived on Japan's northernmost island of Hokkaido, in Sakhalin, and the Kuril Islands. Their distinct appearance, full beards, fair skin, and deep-set eyes, set them apart from the people of mainland Japan. But their differences go beyond just looks. Unlike the rest of Japan, which was shaped by rice agriculture and imperial rule, the Ainu thrived as hunter-gatherers, relying on the forests and rivers for survival. They had no written language, no centralized rulers. Yet they built a complex society with deep spiritual traditions, believing that everything in nature held a soul. But while history remembers the Ainu as a distinct culture, their origins are a mystery that no historian or geneticist has fully cracked. Ancient Japanese texts barely mention them. For a long time, people assumed they were simply the last pure descendants of the Jomon people, the original inhabitants of Japan from over 14,000 years ago. But modern DNA research completely changed that theory. When scientists started analyzing Ainu genetics, they found something shocking. Their DNA is unlike that of the modern Japanese. In fact, it doesn't even fully match the Jomon people either. Here's where things get even stranger. The vast majority of East Asians, from China to Korea to Japan, share certain genetic markers. One of the most common is haplogroup O, which is found in over 90% of men in these regions. But the Ainu, they don't have it. Instead, they belong to haplogroup D1b D2, which is incredibly rare worldwide. The only other places it's found, Tibet and the Andaman Islands. How did this unique lineage survive in Japan while vanishing from almost everywhere else? And it's not just the paternal lineage. Mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down through the mother's side, reveals an even bigger surprise. While the Ainu do share some Jomon ancestry, nearly 35% of their maternal DNA is linked to the Okhotsk people, an ancient seafaring culture from the Russian Far East. But that's not all. Their DNA also carries markers found in Siberian tribes, Mongolic peoples, and even Native Americans. Could the Ainu be part of an ancient migration wave that once stretched across all of northern Asia? The more scientists dig, the more the mystery deepens. Some theories suggest that the Ainu's ancestors could have been part of a lost migration that took place thousands of years before recorded history, possibly connected to the people who first crossed into North America. But if that's true, why are they still in Japan while their distant relatives moved on? Even more puzzling, early European explorers who encountered the Ainu in the 18th and 19th centuries were convinced they were not East Asian at all. Some speculated they were connected to ancient Caucasian tribes that had somehow ended up in Japan. This idea has been completely debunked by modern genetics, but the fact remains. The Ainu's unique genetic makeup sets them apart not only from the Japanese, but from nearly every other population in Asia. For over a century, the Ainu were almost erased from history. After Japan's modernization, government policies forced them to assimilate, abandon their traditions, and even change their names. Their language was banned, their cultural practices were outlawed, and their genetic uniqueness almost lost forever. But today, a new chapter is unfolding. With the resurgence of interest in Ainu heritage and cutting-edge DNA sequencing, scientists are getting closer than ever to unraveling this genetic enigma. Could the Ainu be the key to understanding prehistoric migrations across Eurasia and beyond? The story of the Ainu is far from over. Every new genetic discovery brings us closer to answering one of humanity's greatest unsolved questions. Where did we really come from? For decades, the Ainu people were thought to be Japan's last direct link to the ancient Jomon civilization. But modern genetics tells a far more complicated story. The more scientists analyze Ainu DNA, the more they realize something shocking. Their ancestry is not as straightforward as we once believed. The Jomon people were Japan's original settlers, arriving over 14,000 years ago and living a hunter-gatherer lifestyle that lasted for millennia. They left behind incredible pottery, some of the oldest in the world, and skeletal remains that suggest they had distinct facial features unlike the modern Japanese. For a long time, historians assumed the Ainu were simply their direct descendants. But then, DNA testing changed everything. When scientists began mapping the Ainu genome, they found something unexpected. The Ainu do share genetic ties to the Jomon, but not exclusively. Nearly 35% of their maternal DNA comes from an entirely different group of people, the Okhotsk culture, an ancient maritime society from the Russian Far East. Who were these Okhotsk people? And how did they become such a major part of the Ainu's genetic history? The Okhotsk people lived along the coasts of northern Japan, Sakhalin, and the Russian Far East from around 1,500 years ago until they mysteriously disappeared. Archaeological evidence shows they were skilled seafarers and hunters, using advanced fishing techniques and domesticating dogs for hunting. But they were not originally from Japan. Their genetic roots traced back to Siberia and the Amur River region, where the ancestors of modern-day Tungusic-speaking peoples, like the Ulchi and Evenks, once lived. For centuries, the Okhotsk people thrived along Japan's northern islands. But then something happened. They vanished. Or at least, that's what historians thought. But now, genetics proves that they never truly disappeared. They became part of the Ainu. When the Okhotsk people came into contact with the ancestors of the Ainu, they mixed, both culturally and genetically. And the result? A people with deep Jomon roots, but also a significant genetic link to Siberian hunter-gatherers. This means that the Ainu are not just the last of the Jomon. They are something entirely unique. But the genetic surprises don't stop there. Another strange twist in the Ainu's genetic history comes from their Y chromosome DNA, which is passed down from father to son. While most East Asians, including the modern Japanese, belong to haplogroups O and C, the Ainu are almost entirely different. Nearly 87.5% of Ainu men belong to haplogroup D1b, formerly D2, a lineage that is nearly extinct outside of Japan. The only other places it exists? Tibet and the Andaman Islands. This raises a huge question. How did a genetic lineage that once spread across Asia become so concentrated in just these isolated regions? Some scientists believe that haplogroup D could be one of the most ancient genetic markers in Asia, possibly tracing back to some of the first humans to settle the continent. But the fact that it survived in such high numbers among the Ainu suggests something even more intriguing. This was no accident. Did the Jomon people, and later the Ainu, somehow preserve this rare lineage while other populations lost it through mixing and migrations? Or was there something unique about their isolation in Japan's northern regions that allowed their genetic signature to remain so distinct? And then there's the mystery of their maternal lineage. Mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down from mother to child, tells a slightly different story. The Ainu have high levels of haplogroups N9b and M7a, both of which are rare outside of Japan. But here's the catch. Some of these maternal lineages are also found in ancient Siberian populations and even in Native Americans. Could the Ainu be connected to prehistoric migrations that once stretched across the Bering Strait and into North America? Some geneticists believe that certain mtDNA haplogroups found in the Ainu, like D4, could be evidence of an ancient population that once spread from Siberia into the Americas thousands of years ago. All of this raises one major question. If the Ainu are not purely Jomon, and if they carry significant genetic influences from the Okhotsk and even Siberian populations, what does that mean for Japan's ancient history? For years, the dominant theory of Japan's population history was the dual structure model, which stated that Japan was originally inhabited by the Jomon people, and later, the Yayoi farmers from mainland Asia arrived and mixed with them, forming the modern Japanese population. But the Ainu don't quite fit this model. Their DNA suggests a more complex and dynamic history, one where multiple groups, including Jomon, Okhotsk, and other Siberian tribes, all played a role in shaping the Ainu people. And yet, despite their genetic uniqueness, the Ainu were nearly erased from history. After Japan's modernization, the government forced Ainu people to assimilate into Japanese society, banning their language and traditions. Their distinct identity was nearly lost. For over a century, many Ainu were forced to hide their heritage. Some still do, afraid of the stigma and discrimination that followed them for generations. But today, modern genetics is bringing their story back to life. With each new study, we uncover more about the Ainu's origins, their migrations, and the incredible journey that shaped them into who they are today. The Ainu are not simply the last Jomon. They are something far more mysterious, a living link to ancient peoples that once roamed across all of northern Asia, carrying with them secrets that we are only just beginning to understand. For centuries, the Ainu people were seen as an isolated group, disconnected from the rest of the world. But when scientists began analyzing their DNA, they uncovered something that rewrote history. The Ainu weren't just an isolated remnant of Japan's past. They were part of an ancient genetic network that spanned continents. And one of the biggest surprises? Their unexpected connections to Siberian tribes and even Native Americans. To understand this, we have to go back, way back. During the last ice age, nearly 20,000 years ago, the world was frozen, and much of northern Asia was covered in vast glaciers. But in the middle of this icy wasteland, one land bridge connected Asia to North America, Beringia. This frozen corridor, which once linked modern-day Siberia and Alaska, became a crucial migration route for ancient humans. And among the groups that traveled across this land bridge were the ancestors of today's Native Americans. For a long time, historians believed that these early migrants came from a single population in Siberia. But recent DNA studies suggest that it wasn't that simple. The genetic fingerprints of the Ainu reveal unexpected links to groups that once lived along the Amur River Basin, the Russian Far East, and even the Arctic coastlines of North America. One of the biggest clues: haplogroup D4. This maternal lineage is found in both the Ainu and Native American populations, especially in tribes from the Pacific Northwest. In fact, when researchers mapped the distribution of D4 subclades, they discovered that some strains found in Japan are nearly identical to those found in ancient remains from Alaska and British Columbia. Could this mean that the ancestors of the Ainu once shared a common origin with the first Americans? To answer that, we need to look at another key genetic marker, haplogroup C3. While most Japanese populations carry Y-DNA haplogroups O and D, about 12.5% of Ainu men belong to haplogroup C3. This is the same paternal lineage that dominates indigenous Siberian groups like the Nivki, Evenks, and Koryaks. And what's even more fascinating, C3 is also found in some Native American tribes, including the Nadine speakers of Alaska and Canada. This means that thousands of years ago, a population of ancient hunter-gatherers, possibly related to both the Ainu and Siberian tribes, may have been part of the Great Migration into the Americas. But how did these connections form? One theory is that the ancestors of the Ainu, the Jomon people, weren't completely isolated in Japan. Instead, they were part of a much larger prehistoric trade and migration network that stretched from Siberia to the Pacific Islands. Archaeological evidence backs this up. Jomon-style pottery has been found in coastal Siberia, Korea, and even as far as Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula. This suggests that the Jomon people were not just passive islanders, but active participants in early seafaring and trade. Even their tools hint at these ancient connections. Some of the oldest microblade stone tools, which were once used by early Ainu ancestors, bear striking similarities to those found among ancient Native American sites in Alaska. These tools were not a local invention. Similar styles have been found across Siberia and Northeast Asia, suggesting a shared technology that spread across regions over thousands of years. But there's one more mystery that makes the Ainu's genetic puzzle even stranger. A unique genetic marker known as haplogroup X, which is most commonly found in Europe and the Middle East, has been detected in both the Ainu and some Native American tribes. This is shocking because haplogroup X is virtually absent in most of Asia. How did this European-linked genetic signature end up in both Japan and North America, but not in the lands in between? Some researchers believe this could point to an ancient migration that predates even the Beringian crossings. Others speculate that small groups of prehistoric mariners could have traveled along the Pacific coastlines, hopping from Siberia to Japan, and eventually to North America. Whatever the answer, one thing is clear: the Ainu are not a genetic island. They are a living link to an ancient web of human migrations, one that stretches across the entire Pacific Rim and beyond. And yet, for most of history, their story was almost lost. After the Meiji government took control of Hokkaido in the late 1800s, The Ainu were forced to abandon their traditions and integrate into Japanese society. Their culture, language, and even their very identity were nearly erased. Today, many Ainu remain unaware of their own deep genetic history. But with modern DNA analysis, the truth is finally being uncovered. The Ainu are not just Japan's indigenous people. They are survivors of a lineage that connects them to ancient Siberians, prehistoric Americans, and the very first explorers of the Pacific. Their DNA holds secrets that could reshape our understanding of how humans populated the world, and we are only beginning to unlock them. For decades, researchers believed the Ainu were a genetic anomaly, isolated, distinct, and unchanged for thousands of years. But when scientists expanded their DNA research beyond Japan, an unexpected connection emerged, stretching far beyond Hokkaido and Sakhalin. The Ainu shared genetic links with Siberian tribes, native Arctic populations, and even, possibly, some of the first Americans. One of the most shocking discoveries came from the study of mtDNA haplogroup Y1, a genetic marker found in the Ainu that is almost exclusively seen in the indigenous peoples of the Russian Far East, including the Nivki and Ulchi of the Amur River Basin. This suggested that the ancestors of the Ainu were not just confined to Japan, but were once part of a larger network of hunter-gatherers moving across northern Asia. But the real surprise? Their connection to Native Americans. Multiple studies have found genetic overlaps between the Ainu and certain indigenous groups in North America, particularly in HLA genes, the immune system markers that play a key role in human adaptation. The Ainu share specific HLA haplotypes with tribes like the Tlingit in Alaska and even some South American indigenous groups. This is astonishing because it hints at a possible ancient migration link, one that predates the formation of modern East Asian populations. But how is this possible? How could a people from the northernmost islands of Japan be genetically connected to populations across the Pacific? The answer might lie in the last glacial maximum, a period around 20,000 years ago when sea levels were much lower, exposing land bridges that connected Siberia, Japan, and even North America. During this time, groups of hunter-gatherers could have moved freely across these regions, carrying their genetic markers with them. Even more intriguing, the Ainu's Y-DNA haplogroup CM217, found in a small percentage of Ainu men, is dominant among Mongolic and Turkic-speaking Siberian nomads. This is the same lineage carried by the Nivki, the Koryaks, and other indigenous Siberian groups, suggesting that the Ainu's ancestors were once part of a vast northern migration, moving between Asia and the Pacific. But if the Ainu are so genetically linked to these other groups, why are they so different? One possible explanation is genetic drift and isolation. Unlike the mainland Japanese, who mixed extensively with early agricultural migrants from China and Korea, the Ainu remained in their own distinct communities, allowing their unique genetic heritage to persist. Their physical features, fair skin, deep-set eyes, and wavy hair, might not be the result of recent European or Caucasian ancestry, as some have speculated, but rather a preservation of ancient Northern Asian traits, similar to those seen in some Siberian and Arctic populations. This brings us to an even deeper question. Did the Ainu preserve a genetic legacy that was lost in other populations? Were they a remnant of an ancient people who once spread across Northern Asia, only to be absorbed and replaced elsewhere, surviving only in the remote islands of Japan? These are questions that still remain unanswered, but one thing is clear. The Ainu are not an isolated genetic outlier. They are a living connection to a much older, more complex human migration story, one that challenges everything we thought we knew about ancient Asia and the Pacific. Across the vast landscapes of Eurasia, from the icy shores of Hokkaido to the remote tundras of Siberia and the Pacific coastline, there exists a genetic thread that ties the Ainu to other indigenous groups. But just how deep does this connection go? The Ainu, often regarded as an isolated people, actually share surprising genetic and cultural links with various indigenous groups across Asia and even North America. Unraveling these connections offers an astonishing glimpse into ancient migrations, forgotten civilizations, and the intricate web of human ancestry. For decades, scholars assumed the Ainu were solely descendants of Japan's ancient Jomon people. However, modern genetic research paints a much more complex picture. DNA studies have revealed striking similarities between the Ainu and indigenous Siberian groups, such as the Nivki and the Ulchi, particularly in mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome markers. These connections suggest a shared ancestry that predates recorded history. The presence of Y haplogroup CM217 among some Ainu men directly links them to the nomadic Nivki of Sakhalin Island, reinforcing the theory that the Ainu's ancestors may have had extensive contact with Siberian hunter-gatherers. Even more intriguing is the Ainu's possible link to Native American populations. Certain genetic markers, including mitochondrial haplogroup D, have been found in both the Ainu and some Native American tribes, particularly among the Nadine-speaking people of North America. Some researchers argue this could be evidence of an ancient migration route that connected the indigenous populations of Northeast Asia with the first settlers of the Americas. If true, it would mean that thousands of years before recorded history, the ancestors of the Ainu may have been part of a vast, interconnected network of prehistoric migrations spanning entire continents. Beyond genetics, cultural similarities also hint at deep-rooted connections. The Ainu's traditional tattooing practices bear striking resemblances to those of the indigenous peoples of the Russian Far East and even the Pacific Northwest. Their belief systems, centered around animism and a deep reverence for nature, are remarkably similar to those found among the Nivki, Koryaks, and even some Inuit groups. Could it be that these isolated cultures are fragments of a much larger and older civilization that once thrived across the northern Pacific? Despite these fascinating findings, many mysteries remain. While genetic links between the Ainu and various indigenous groups are well documented, the exact historical migrations and interactions that led to these connections are still largely unknown. Did the ancestors of the Ainu once roam freely across the vast expanses of Siberia and North America? Were they part of an ancient maritime culture that traded and traveled along the Pacific Rim long before recorded history? What is certain is that the Ainu are not an isolated anomaly in human history. They are a crucial piece of a much larger puzzle, one that continues to challenge our understanding of migration, adaptation, and human interconnectedness. For centuries, scientists have tried to categorize human populations into distinct genetic models, neat, structured explanations of how people migrated, mixed, and evolved. But then there's the Ainu, a group that refuses to fit into any traditional framework. Their DNA tells a story unlike any other, one that challenges widely accepted theories about East Asian ancestry and human migration itself. Most genetic models of the Japanese archipelago rely on the widely accepted dual-structure hypothesis, which suggests that modern Japanese people originated from two major ancestral sources: the Jomon People, who arrived more than 30,000 years ago, and the Yayoi people, who migrated from Northeast Asia around 2,300 years ago. According to this model, the Jomon were the indigenous hunter-gatherers, while the Yayoi brought agriculture, metalworking, and a new genetic influx that reshaped Japan's population. But the Ainu complicate this narrative in ways no one expected. For one, their genetic markers show continuity with the ancient Jomon, but with significant traces of Siberian and even Central Asian ancestry, lineages that are not dominant in the modern Japanese population. Mitochondrial DNA analysis has revealed that while the Ainu carry key Jomon markers, like haplogroup N9b, they also have genetic signatures linked to the Okhotsk culture and indigenous Siberian groups, including the Nivki and Ulchi. This suggests that the Ainu did not remain isolated but instead absorbed genetic influences from across Northeast Asia. Another anomaly is found in their Y chromosome data. Unlike mainland Japanese, who primarily carry haplogroups O and C, the vast majority of Ainu men belong to haplogroup D, M55, a lineage that is almost exclusively found in Japan but has deep evolutionary connections to Tibetans and Andaman Islanders. This means that the Ainu's paternal ancestry is neither purely Jomon nor directly related to the Yayoi migrants. Instead, it represents a genetic lineage that has been in Japan for tens of thousands of years, separate from the major genetic influxes that shaped the rest of East Asia. But perhaps the most unexpected twist is the genetic connection between the Ainu and certain Native American populations. Some studies suggest that the Ainu share distant ancestry with groups like the Tlingit and Haida of the Pacific Northwest, based on shared mitochondrial DNA haplogroups. Could the ancestors of the Ainu have once been part of a broader migration that stretched across the Bering Land Bridge into the Americas? If so, their DNA might hold clues to one of the greatest mysteries of human history, the peopling of the New World. All of this poses a major challenge to existing genetic models. The Ainu are neither a simple continuation of the Jomon nor a product of Yayoi admixture. They are a genetic mosaic, reflecting thousands of years of migration, adaptation, and survival in one of the most unique environments in the world. Their DNA forces scientists to rethink how populations mixed in prehistoric East Asia, questioning the idea that Japan was ever genetically isolated. In the end, the Ainu prove that human history isn't as simple as we once thought. It's not just a straight line from one ancient population to the next. It's a vast, interconnected web, full of unexpected connections, lost migrations, and unanswered questions. And as genetic research continues to advance, one thing is certain. The Ainu will remain at the center of some of the most fascinating debates in anthropology and human evolution. At first glance, the Ainu of Japan seem completely unique. Their distinct facial features, wavy hair, and traditional hunter-gatherer lifestyle set them apart from the rest of East Asia. But the deeper scientists have dug into their DNA, the more unexpected connections have emerged. Surprisingly, the Ainu share genetic ties with indigenous groups from vastly different regions, places as distant as Siberia, Tibet, and even North America. One of the most striking connections is between the Ainu and the Nivki people of Sakhalin Island. Both groups share mitochondrial DNA haplogroups such as G1b and Y1, which are rarely found in mainland Japan, but are more common among Siberian indigenous groups. This suggests that at some point in history, the ancestors of the Ainu were not entirely isolated. They interacted, traded, or even intermarried with neighboring peoples from the north. Then there's the link between the Ainu and Tibetans, a connection hidden in their Y chromosome DNA. The dominant paternal lineage among Ainu men, haplogroup DM55, is part of the same broader haplogroup family as that found in Tibetans and Andaman Islanders. This genetic marker is extremely rare outside of Japan, yet it points to a shared ancient ancestry that might trace back tens of thousands of years to a time before major migrations shaped modern populations. But perhaps the most shocking connection comes from across the Pacific. Certain Native American tribes share genetic similarities with the Ainu. Studies on HLA gene markers and mitochondrial DNA have found links between the Ainu and indigenous groups like the Tlingit of Alaska and the Haida of the Pacific Northwest. Some researchers speculate that the Ainu's ancestors could have been part of a much earlier migration wave that once spanned the Bering Strait, long before the ancestors of modern Native Americans crossed into the Americas. This idea is further supported by the presence of haplogroup X, a rare genetic marker found in both some Ainu individuals and North American indigenous groups. Haplogroup X has long puzzled scientists because it is not commonly found in East Asia, yet it appears in both the Altai region of Central Asia and among tribes in North America. Could the Ainu be a genetic bridge, preserving traces of an ancient migration that connected Asia to the Americas? All of this challenges the traditional story of human migration. It suggests that long before recorded history, people were moving across continents, interacting, sharing genes, and leaving behind traces of their existence in the DNA of distant populations. The Ainu are not an isolated anomaly, but rather a living record of ancient human movement, one that links them to some of the most unexpected indigenous groups in the world. Yet despite these fascinating discoveries, many questions remain. How exactly did these genetic connections form? Were the Ainu's ancestors part of an early wave of explorers who reached Siberia, North America, and beyond? Or did separate migrations happen at different times, creating overlapping genetic footprints? One thing is certain. The Ainu challenge everything we thought we knew about genetic history. They prove that the past is full of unexpected connections, ones that are still waiting to be fully understood. For decades, historians and scientists have debated what really happened to Japan's ancient Jomon people. These early hunter-gatherers thrived on the Japanese archipelago for thousands of years, long before the arrival of rice-farming Yayoi migrants from mainland Asia. But as time passed, the Jomon culture disappeared. Or did it? Some researchers believe that the Ainu, Japan's indigenous people of Hokkaido, might be the last living descendants of the Jomon. Their DNA, traditions, and physical features are strikingly different from the rest of Japan's population. Unlike the Yayoi-influenced Japanese, who have more East Asian genetic traits, the Ainu show strong links to ancient Jomon ancestry. The biggest clue lies in mitochondrial DNA, the genetic material passed down from mother to child. Studies show that a significant portion of Ainu maternal lineages match those found in Jomon remains, particularly haplogroups N9b and G1b. These haplogroups are rare in modern mainland Japanese, but appear frequently in ancient Jomon samples. This suggests a direct genetic connection between the Ainu and their prehistoric predecessors. On the paternal side, the Ainu carry Y haplogroup DM55, a genetic marker that traces back to the earliest settlers of Japan. This haplogroup is almost non-existent in China or Korea, but is found in Tibet, the Andaman Islands, and, most importantly, ancient Jomon remains. In contrast, modern Japanese populations show a mix of both Jomon and Yayoi ancestry, meaning they experienced significant genetic blending. The Ainu, however, have preserved much more of their original Jomon heritage. Beyond genetics, the Ainu also maintain cultural and physical traits that align with the Jomon. The Jomon people were known for their distinctive pottery, intricate tattoos, and reliance on fishing and hunting. These same traditions continued among the Ainu, even as mainland Japan embraced rice agriculture and urbanization. Some Ainu words and linguistic structures also appear to be remnants of a language that predates Japanese, possibly linking back to the Jomon era. But if the Ainu are the closest living relatives of the Jomon, how did they survive while the rest of Japan moved on? One theory is that when Yayoi migrants spread through the Japanese islands, they pushed Jomon groups northward into the rugged, less accessible terrain of Hokkaido. Here, they could maintain their way of life, while the rest of Japan transformed under Yayoi influence. Over time, they became known as the Ainu, while other Jomon-descended groups either mixed with the Yayoi or disappeared entirely. However, the Ainu's genetic history is not as simple as being pure Jomon. Recent studies suggest that they also carry DNA from the Okhotsk culture people, a seafaring group from Siberia who lived in northern Japan and Sakhalin centuries ago. This means that while the Ainu do have strong Jomon roots, they also absorbed influences from other populations over time. Even so, the Ainu remain the strongest surviving link to the ancient Jomon people. Their DNA, traditions, and lifestyle provide a glimpse into a world that existed thousands of years ago. Without them, our understanding of Japan's earliest inhabitants would be incomplete. But the Ainu story is still unfolding. As genetic research advances, new discoveries could reveal even more about their mysterious past. Could the Ainu hold the key to unlocking the full story of the Jomon? Or are there other, yet-to-be-discovered remnants of Japan's first settlers, hidden in the genetic code of modern populations? One thing is certain. The Ainu are not just an isolated people of Japan's north. They are a living connection to a prehistoric world, one that continues to reshape our understanding of history. For centuries, the Ainu people of Japan faced an overwhelming force, cultural assimilation. From the 19th century onward, the Japanese government imposed strict policies aimed at erasing their language, traditions, and way of life. Ainu children were forced into Japanese schools, their spiritual practices were banned, and even their names were changed to fit Japanese norms. Yet, despite relentless efforts to integrate them into the larger Japanese society, the Ainu have defied assimilation in a way few indigenous groups have. But how? The answer lies in both their culture and their DNA. Unlike many indigenous populations around the world who were absorbed into larger ethnic groups through intermarriage, the Ainu maintained a distinct genetic identity, separate from the Yayoi-influenced majority of Japan. Their mitochondrial and Y-chromosomal DNA reveal a story of resilience and continuity that goes back thousands of years. Mitochondrial DNA studies show that Ainu maternal lineages have a strong connection to the Jomon people, the original hunter-gatherers of Japan. Haplogroups such as N9b and G1b, which are rare in modern mainland Japanese, are found in high frequencies among the Ainu and in Jomon skeletal remains. This suggests that even as Japan underwent waves of migration and cultural shifts, the Ainu managed to preserve a large portion of their ancient ancestry. On the paternal side, the Ainu overwhelmingly belong to Y haplogroup DM55, a genetic marker that is almost exclusive to Japan and its indigenous populations. Unlike the Yayoi descendants of Japan, who carry a mix of mainland East Asian haplogroups such as OM175, the Ainu have retained this rare lineage, which can be traced directly to the early settlers of Japan. In other words, the Ainu did not just culturally resist assimilation, they genetically resisted it as well. But survival was not just about DNA. It was about adaptation. Even as their numbers dwindled and their lands were taken, the Ainu found ways to keep their traditions alive. Rituals were practiced in secret. Elders passed down oral histories, and in remote villages, their unique language continued to be spoken. Despite attempts to erase them, the Ainu never disappeared. In fact, modern genetic studies now suggest that Ainu ancestry is more widespread than previously thought. While official estimates say there are around 25,000 Ainu in Japan today, some researchers believe that number could be 200,000 or more, because many Ainu descendants simply do not disclose their heritage due to lingering discrimination. In 2008, the Japanese government finally recognized the Ainu as an indigenous people with their own language, religion, and culture, a milestone moment after over a century of oppression. But recognition alone is not enough. The fight to preserve Ainu heritage continues, and genetic research plays a crucial role in proving that their lineage is not just a relic of the past, but a living, breathing continuation of Japan's most ancient ancestry. The Ainu are more than a historical footnote. They are a testament to the power of identity. In the face of overwhelming assimilation, they did what many could not. They survived. The story of the Ainu is one of mystery, resilience, and survival. For decades, their origins were debated, their genetics misunderstood, and their history overlooked. But as modern science advances, we are now on the brink of discoveries that could reshape our entire understanding of Japan's ancient past. Genetic research on the Ainu has already revealed groundbreaking insights, proving their deep connection to the Jomon people, exposing their genetic divergence from the Yayoi-influenced mainland Japanese, and highlighting the unexpected Siberian and Okhotsk influences in their lineage. But the research is far from over. In fact, it's only just beginning. With next-generation sequencing and advances in ancient DNA extraction, scientists can now study even the smallest genetic traces left in ancient remains. This means that future research won't just confirm the Ainu's past, it will reveal new ancestral connections that we never even suspected. Could there be hidden genetic links between the Ainu and other indigenous Arctic or Pacific populations? Could undiscovered Jomon-era remains provide even deeper insights into their origins? Another key development in Ainu genetic research is population-scale genome mapping. So far, most studies have been based on relatively small sample sizes, but as more Ainu descendants come forward and participate in genetic studies, a fuller picture of their ancestry will emerge. We may soon learn how much Ainu DNA is still present in modern Japanese populations, revealing a legacy that extends far beyond Hokkaido. But genetic research isn't just about the past. It has real implications for the future. Understanding Ainu genetics could unlock medical insights that benefit not just them but people across the world. Indigenous populations often carry unique genetic adaptations. Could the Ainu possess ancient immune system traits that help fight certain diseases? Could their genetic resilience hold clues to longevity or environmental adaptation? And then there's the biggest question of all. What will happen to the Ainu people in the future? Genetic research is helping to restore a history that was nearly erased. But will that be enough to preserve their identity? As more Ainu reclaim their heritage and younger generations take pride in their ancestry, DNA research is giving them the scientific evidence to prove what they have always known, that their roots run deep and their story is far from over. The future of Ainu genetic research isn't just about looking back. It's about paving the way forward. Every discovery brings them one step closer to reclaiming their rightful place in history. And as technology continues to evolve, one thing is certain. The mystery of Ainu DNA is far from solved.